On today's episode of CyberBytes the podcast, I'm joined by Bob Blakley, co-founder and chief product officer of Mimic. Mimic closed a 50 million Series A in February to tackle the major ransomware risks that businesses face. I'm Oliver Legg, co-founder of Aspiron Search. Enjoy the show. Whoa, it is a pleasure to welcome Bob Blakley, the co-founder of Mimic Security, to CyberBytes the podcast. How's it going, Bob?
It's going great. How are you, Oliver?
I'm good. I It's a shame that we did not manage to do this at Black Hat. This is still very much of the Black Hat series, but as you can see, we are not in the Mandalay in Las Vegas. But I certainly feel a lot more refreshed doing this virtually after the conference.
Well, I've tried to put on, a little graphic reminder of the excesses of Las Vegas for you here today.
Exactly. I mean, the plus side is we get to see the flamingos, so we wouldn't have got that if we were in the Mandalay Bay.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, really awesome to have you on. And I guess being able to do this after Black Hat, it does allow us to actually talk about the conference itself and what kind of benefit you actually get from it. Because there's always mixed feelings on the success and the value and the ROI of the spend that goes into that kind of conference. So eager to get your take, especially as still an early stage security vendor.
So, my experience over many years at the bigger industry conferences is always that the primary value that you get out of these things is in networking and relationship building, right? So it is uniquely valuable to have a huge percentage of the security community all in one place where you can actually find them and get a meeting and have a conversation and kind of move the ball forward on things. So we spend a lot of time, in one-on-one meetings and briefings and exploratory conversations, and that was, I think, very productive and very valuable. You could have any attitude you want toward the sessions and the show floor, but at the end of the day, the reason that you travel, especially these days in a post-COVID world, is to be with people, and being with people one-on-one is, I think, the highest percentage thing that you can do.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I mean, you have what must be a pretty ridiculously long list of contacts. You've been in this industry for, I mean, what, coming on 50 years now? Having got into the industry in 1970, you told me, what was it even called then? Because I can't imagine it was actually classed as cybersecurity. I mean, what was the terms that were being used to define the space that is now the cybersecurity sector?
Yeah, so back in the late 70s and early 80s, there were a bunch of different terms for what people were doing, right? You would talk about computer security, you would talk about network security, you would talk about trusted computing and software assurance. And then, of course, you would talk about cryptography. The reason that I got into the industry to start with back in 1976 was that my dad was a cryptographer, and I did
Mm,
some work with him, some of the early work on weaknesses in RSA. And he was one of the inventors of secret sharing systems, so I worked with him on some of that. So I sort of initially got in through the cryptography side, but it wasn't until later that people came to think of all these things as aspects of one big field.
mm, yeah. And I mean, you've personally had a really interesting journey from practitioner to investor and kind of VC evangelist to now being a founder of a Series A security vendor. So, kind of give us a bit of an insight into your journey from 1976 to where you are now.
Sure. So after I got done, working around the breakfast table with my dad in the 70s, I went off to college and grad school, and I worked in grad school at a little startup called Winterhalter Incorporated. in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We did secure communications for 3270 protocols running over telephone lines. So we would have a 300 baud Hayes modem and be sending traffic to an IBM 3270 system on the back end at places like ADP. Uh, as sort of as a follow-on to that, out of graduate school, I went to work for IBM, working on communication security protocols in Austin, and eventually, over about 17 years with IBM all in, worked on more or less every aspect of security that the company had. I ended up as the chief scientist for security at IBM. In the middle of that, I worked at another early stage startup, a company called Dascom. I left IBM to join Dascom, and IBM then bought them back at the end of the year. But then when I left IBM more permanently, I had been sort of a brand ambassador and going around doing keynotes and thought leadership pieces at various different conferences, one of which was the Burton Group Catalyst Conference. Burton Group was a tech industry analyst firm focusing on identity management and directory technology. And after I left IBM, I went to join them to become an industry analyst, and we eventually got bought by Gartner. So I spent a couple of years leading one of the services at Gartner. And then after that, an old friend and colleague called me up and invited me to join Citigroup as the head of security innovation, which meant essentially being the introduction vector for technologies from the public startup market into the bank. So I was half-time in the security team there and then half-time on the venture investing team at Citi.
Mm.
And following that, when my boss at Citi retired, I went to be a venture capitalist full-time at a company called Team8, which is headquartered in Tel Aviv and New York. It's a VC firm specializing in creating companies specifically in the cybersecurity market. And it was there that I went through the ideation process that led me to be a co-founder of Mimic around, ideation around ransomware defense.
Yeah, awesome. And so being able to start a new cybersecurity company with the lens of a security practitioner, a technologist, an analyst, and an investor, what kind of edge do you feel that that's given you when founding a company in comparison to, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands, of absolutely brilliant founders, but inexperienced first-time founders?
So, there are a bunch of things that you learn by having done the job of an investor or a practitioner. A lot of people who haven't been through the startup cycle sort of have an idea that venture capitalists are looking for the best idea in a market space. But in reality, of course, it's a lot more than that, right? They're looking for an excellent team. They're looking for the ability to execute. They're looking for an addressable market, which is differentiated from competitors and a bunch of other things. So, having been in the position to hear a lot of startup teams pitch their ideas and pitch their companies, really gave me a great perspective on what it takes to navigate funding for a startup. And of course, I have a partner, our CEO, Derek Smith, who is, much more experienced than I am as a startup founder, and he's also, deeply experienced at all of those things. And then, when you're a practitioner, the main thing that you learn is that one aspect of the success of a new technology is it successful at doing what it says it does, right? So if I say I'm going to defend you against ransomware, I have to do that. But another aspect of adopting a new technology is what does it break, and how much effort is it to install it, and how much effort and personnel do you need to operate it on a day-to-day basis, and what's the life cycle cost, and how hard is it to manage, and how does it integrate into all the other tools in an enterprise. And those are things that it's really hard to appreciate in detail unless you've been on the receiving end and had to actually implement some of these products as they come in.
I guess it's a an empathy and an appreciation of being in the seat of the person that buys the tool, implements the tool, or manages the people implementing and using it. So, yeah, interesting. And what do Mimic actually do? You're protecting against the ransomware space, but give some more insight into what the founding mission is and what you're actually aiming to help customers and enterprises do.
Sure. So if you look at security technologies in general in the market today, uh, they address security risks. And ransomware is obviously a big category of risk. You see it in the newspapers and in other media reports literally every week these days. And it has a big impact, especially in sectors like healthcare and government.
Mm,
The way that a lot of security technologies deal with risk is the definition of risk is the probability that a bad event will occur multiplied by the impact of the event. Uh, a lot of security technologies function by concentrating almost exclusively on reducing the probability that a bad event will occur. And it's very important to do that, but it isn't the whole equation because you never reduce the probability all the way to zero. And if you look at the recent high-profile ransomware incidents, things like CDK and Change Healthcare and Marks and Spencer and others, the impact is in the tens of millions of dollars.
mhm,
So if you have just one of those incidents, it's a very bad event. So what we're trying to do at Mimic is to sort of balance the equation by focusing primarily on minimizing the impact of a ransomware event. We assume that a system can be breached. The standard security mantra is assume breach, right? So when you're protecting the enterprise, assume that the bad guy has gotten into your enterprise. So we take assume breach very seriously, and we assume that that means that an adversary has figured out how to get around or through your defenses. And so what we are trying to do is be the last line of defense against ransomware. And after the adversary has been able to get into the system and initiate an attack, our objective is to shut that attack down extremely rapidly and to minimize the amount of damage that it does.
mhm. And what are some of the kind of successful use cases or success stories of where this really has minimized the impact of a real breach?
So, so far, we have not had the privilege of having one of our customers experience a breach on a system that we're protecting. We're still an early stage startup. We hope that'll never happen, right? Uh, and that actually is an interesting thing to say, right? So at one level, you might interpret that as saying we hope nobody ever uses the product, but that's not true at
Mhm,
all. Actually, one of the really interesting things that we've discovered is that if you build a product which is aimed at stopping ransomware once it gets onto the target system, sort of onto the crown jewel systems, what that means is that you have to pay very careful attention to all the changes that are taking place on that system. And so we have discovered that our defenses also are extremely good at improving the change management hygiene for critical servers in an enterprise. And what that lets us do is it lets us deliver value to a customer every day even on days when they don't have a ransomware actor attacking them, instead of just once or twice a year when something terrible tries to happen.
Mm. And what is the actual reality of implementing these change management systems and structures?
So the reality, change management is one of the core enterprise functions,
Mm,
right? So one of the things that CIOs and CISOs and IT operations people do every day is they run a disciplined process for patching systems, upgrading systems, changing policy on systems, changing configuration of systems. And that process it does lots of things right, but also most of the time there are lots of things that it doesn't see, right? So, for example, you look at the outage that CrowdStrike had last year. The change management processes of enterprises saw a normal update to the CrowdStrike sensor, and it turned out that there was a defect in that. So the change management process went ahead and applied the patch because it came from an approved source. But
hmm
what it didn't do was it didn't see in real time that the patch was going to do something that interfered with operations. So what we're really trying to add there is a real-time visibility, the visibility within milliseconds of of adverse effects that changes can have, and we are able to block those. We're able to report them to the enterprise, and we're able to prevent damage and also then uh, assist the folks who are doing change management in the enterprise to correct whatever the problem is and reapply the patch so that it actually is implemented and is functioning as intended.
Mm. And so I mean, the CrowdStrike outage was just that. It was an outage. It wasn't a breach or a ransomware attack. But are you saying that the Mimic product, because of the change management side of things, could actually reduce the impact on an enterprise in that kind of outage scenario as well?
So, the majority of outages in enterprise IT systems are not caused by security attacks, right? They're caused by errors and omissions in the change control and administration process. And so, yes, I'm saying that one of the things that we do is we catch those errors and omissions and we suspend them and allow the enterprise to correct them before they can do damage to business continuity or do damage to the integrity of data.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. Um, Again, from the perspective of I mean, a new purchaser of the Mimic security platform, what does the actual reality of day-to-day life look like as this is being onboarded to critical applications?
So the way our system works, a lot of security systems work by essentially building patterns of bad behavior, patterns of things that adversaries do, and then attempting to detect the occurrence of those patterns in a production system.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't the way our system works. We're not trying to look at all of the bad behavior that might possibly exist in an enterprise IT estate. Instead, we are trying to understand how what good behavior looks like, right? So we're looking at normal behavior. We when we onboard an application, we spend a relatively short period of time profiling the behavior of the applications that we're protecting. And so once we have the profile, we know what normal behavior looks like. And then after that, we can go into a protection mode where anything outside of that normal behavior gets either, depending on the customer's preference, either gets reported or gets automatically blocked and reported. So when we are done with our profiling step, we build a protection configuration, we put that into place, and anything that's outside the configuration, we block if the customer has chosen to do that, and we report so that people can remediate things that are going on, whether it's an attack or whether it's an administrative error.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. And I mean, this is coming back to, I guess, the founder aspect and the business aspect. But despite having had years as a practitioner and being on the investment side of City and having exposure to Team 8 and all of these pitches and all of these founders, what was the reality of your life being a founder for the first time?
So it's not the first time I've been a startup executive, right? So I was a CTO at Dascom back in the late 90s. And I worked at Burton Group when it was still very much a startup analyst firm. But it was my first time being a founder. And I guess I would say that the day-to-day experience is that no 2 days are ever the same, right? You are running a really, really complicated operation. A business is a complicated operation. And so sometimes you're looking at legal issues, intellectual property protection or NDAs or contracts or what have you. Sometimes you're looking at pricing. Sometimes you're looking at product direction and strategy issues. Sometimes you're looking at personnel issues. What benefits do we offer? All of the time, you're looking at recruiting and at keeping your people well cared for, because it really is true that the most critical thing in any business is the people. And uh, so the experience of being a founder is uh, sort of defined by the extent to which you can get good at task switching and being really focused on whatever task is in front of you for whatever period it takes to resolve that and then move on to the next thing, right? It really is all about keeping all of the plates spinning.
Hmm. Yeah, it's to a lesser degree because our business is a hell of a lot simpler than than yours, but I can still empathize to a degree on that. And was there anything that particularly surprised you about founder life and actually kind of being at the helm and being in that founder and chief product position for the first time?
Uh, I guess there wasn't anything that really surprised me. I guess the main thing that I ended up paying a lot of attention to, and that I still pay a lot of attention to, which I wouldn't necessarily have predicted in advance, is trying to create an excellent culture in a company which is distributed, right? So
Mm,
we're a post-COVID company. We don't have an office that everybody goes into every day. And so figuring out how to make sure that people know each other and can work smoothly with each other, and what systems and processes facilitate really good interactions between people and ease of understanding. I've spent a lot of time on that, and I would not necessarily have predicted going in that would have been such a big focus.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, there's plenty of companies that have done it wrong, or they've flitted between fully in office to fully remote to hybrid to now fully mandated back in office. And it's companies are still finding their feet with it, even what 5 years on from that first lockdown. And coming back to your time in the industry, and I've realized I've aged you by a year by saying you've been in security for 50 years. It's 50 years next year. So having been in the sector for 49 years now, what trends have you seen come and go, and what trends have you either been most surprised have happened in the first place or been surprised just kind of fizzled out?
So, uh, there have been lots and lots of trends, right? And one of the things that successful companies try to do is to create a trend that they can ride to revenue. A lot of these things kind of come and go, um, and they rarely are fundamental disruptions, right?
Mm,
So I guess I would say that from a security point of view, the three real fundamental disruptions that have happened during my lifetime, forget about my career, are number one, the integrated circuit, right? So the ability to make computers small and affordable enough that everybody can have them instead of, there being like a giant piece of industrial equipment.
mhm,
So that kind of democratization of the technology had a huge impact. The next thing that had a huge impact was the internet, but really more specifically the web, right? So ARPANET and the internet connected primarily government and business installations. But when the web came along, all of a sudden, all of those computers that had been enabled by integrated circuits all got connected up to the same network. And what that meant was that every bad guy in the world was connected to every system in the world. And so, in a very real sense, you had to protect against everything, not just
mhm.
protect against everybody who walked in the door of a particular building. And then I would say that the third thing that's been a real disruption, a real change in the landscape was the introduction of cryptocurrency.
Mhm.
And that's particularly relevant to ransomware. But the thing that cryptocurrency did was essentially it created a mechanism to monetize cybercrime. Previous to the invention of cryptocurrency, you might be able to steal intellectual property. You might be able to get around copy protection on a video game or on an enterprise security product, but you couldn't just reach out and damage anybody and have a way of getting paid for it,
Mm,
right? But the introduction of cryptocurrency really enabled the development of more or less a consumer market for cybercrime, where anybody who could develop some level of proficiency with breaking systems could then, extort a victim for something that could be turned into real money in their own country and maybe in their own country, which didn't have an extradition agreement or jurisdiction for authorities to come and punish them. So I would say those have been the three big things, right? And the latter two are the really important ones: universal connectivity, and then a way to monetize cybercrime. I think are the real revolutions.
you have no idea how refreshing it is, especially doing these kind of doing the CyberBytes series, to have someone that hasn't mentioned AI in anything around trends or like disruptions. So it's yeah, really interesting to hear your three and your take on that.
Well, so I sort of hope. Uh, so, uh, I always used to joke that when I gave a talk, I would always start by saying, "And now for the bad news." Um, the security profession really is mostly about focusing on and managing the downside of these things.
Mm,
I kind of hope that people who are working on AI, I mean, I want them to think about security implications, But I think a lot of people think that AI is going to have a lot of upside, right? And that they're focusing on that, and that the reason that you hear so much about it is because people feel like they're going to generate a lot of money or generate a lot of happiness or generate a lot of new stuff. Uh, and uh, and that's that's excellent if it happens. It will create security problems. Like everything else, AI is a force multiplier, and it allows the creation of badness. It allows the creation of everything faster, right?
Hmm.
And it will allow the creation of badness faster. It's not yet completely clear whether it enables the creation of new kinds of badness, which is where it would have to go to make it a big problem for security.
Hmm. I don't know if you're aware of a chap called Mike Privet and his Return on Security newsletter, but a week or two ago he had a survey that was focused around kind of what is your company's policy to the use and adoption of AI tools, and I can't for the life of me remember the stat, but it was a pretty surprisingly high number that simply answered kind of blanket ban until further notice. And I think that kind of shows you how nervous companies and security teams are of AI. The fact that they're just trying unsuccessfully to stop the use of it. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And I mean,
Well, I mean, the two real concerns, I think, from my point of view, are number one, that AI agents without human supervision are going to try and do a bunch of dumb stuff, like as system administrators or something like that. And we think, that our ability to put guardrails around change control will help out a lot with protecting enterprises against that sort of thing. But then, the other thing to worry about is AI essentially serving as a data exfiltration channel, right? So an AI learns everything about your internal systems, about your documents, about your intellectual property, and then somebody who isn't a member of your staff asks it a question and it says, "Oh yeah, here's all their secrets," right? Um, and so banning, yeah, so what does it mean to ban something in a company? It's very hard to ban technology. Every time you try to do that, you end up with shadow IT. The real core of the problem is figuring out what data you want to expose to the AI and which data you don't want to expose to it.
mhm,
And it's complicated, right? And people are going to have to get a handle on that.
absolutely. And any wild predictions for what might happen next in the next 5, 10, 15 years in the security space?
So, um, I think we have hit the inflection point uh, where, if you're counting bad things, the count is statistically indistinguishable from infinity at this point. So any approach that is based on enumerating all of the bad stuff in the universe is just going to fail. And so I feel good that we are basing our model on known good rather than on enumerating known bad. Um, Also, probably more than 10 years ago now, Dan Geer made the observation that uh, accountability scales, but authorization doesn't. What he meant by that is, if you try to write a set of rules in advance that describes all of the bad things that shouldn't happen, that set of rules becomes too large to manage relatively quickly. So that's authorization, right? I'm going to define a set of access control rules or a set of authentication rules or a set of firewall rules that prevent anything bad from happening. And the list of rules that you need just grows without bound. On the other hand, the number of bad things that actually happen tends to be finite. So if you have a mechanism that can recognize those quickly and administer corrections, either punishment or blocking or what have you, the scale of that problem is much smaller, and so that tends to be feasible. right? And again, you know, trying to enumerate known good and then block everything else, we feel like we are operating on the accountability scale problem rather than on the authorization scale problem.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years pan out and beyond and how the whole industry evolves. But I mean, first and foremost, stoked to keep track of how Mimic is doing and see the kind of continued wins in the ransomware space and follow your journey, Bob. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sorry this wasn't in person in Vegas, but we'll do a follow up there or RSA in a couple of years once there's even more of the story to talk about.
We will indeed sit down again and follow up, and hopefully there will be lots of new and exciting stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bob. Been a pleasure.